Yeah. Okay. Very good. Well, good evening, and thank you very much to the Rui Cunha Foundation for having me tonight to talk about artificial intelligence. In fact, I have had the whole day student presentations of project reports, and most of them are now on the topic of artificial intelligence because it is a very hot topic. It is a global topic, I think, and it is a topic that I think never stops to amaze in terms of what you can discover. And in my case, I would say it's also a topic where I discover more questions than I find answers. So I'm not sure I will have the right answers tonight, but I hope I have the right question for you from Shakespeare: to regulate or to educate, because in the last 3 years, I mean, I've paid a lot of attention to clearly the question of regulating AI. But now, after we have seen some consolidation in this process of regulating AI, I'm not sure, and I'm wondering again, of course, maybe I might be biased as a university professor, that education might be also, and even more important, possibly, in tackling some of the challenges related to AI. But before I want to say a few things about AI, and then also about the way we talk about it, and then I will enter the question of regulation and education, and hopefully have an answer how we decide between education or regulation. The first thing I would like to show is simply this, I think, document from the OECD 2019, already purely a recommendation, no regulation, not binding, but they already recognized at the time that it is far-reaching, I think pervasive and far-reaching with global implications, and that this is only going to become more so in the future. So I think it is hard to deny nowadays that it is not a global issue. And pervasive is also important. I always describe it with cross-cutting, cross-boundary, and also cross-cultural and complex, if you want, and in many ways also contradictory. So that, I think, requires us to think in very different ways, especially as lawyers, because law is still, of course, first it's about jurisdiction and competencies and so on, and within institutions, within the categories of law that we have developed over centuries. And I think it doesn't fit well anymore, and that is a huge challenge. This is also, I think, the UNESCO recommendation is an interesting document to look at, I think, because UNESCO is also like competent for education, science, and culture, and they have produced this recommendation in 2021, which was at the time adopted by 193 members of UNESCO, which is also, I think, supporting the claim that I make that AI is of global concern. And I find the first paragraph recital here is pretty good, because it condenses the main challenges related to the AI, namely, is it good or is it bad, positive and negative impacts. And then also, in particular, it highlights the role of the human mind and the impact it has on the human mind. And I think what I find nowadays most striking is, and that has to do with the debate and the way we frame the debate about AI, that we have to move from regarding it as a technology to actually technology being a kind of mirror that allows us to reproduce our human brain artificially and to learn about our own brains, and not like simply get carried away by the fascination with the tool itself. So it should be a process, a kind of dialectical process of creating and then learning from it through the technology. But of course, and that's the problem, I will mention that the debate has been very strongly, I think, influenced and even dominated by those industries developing it. And that is now also, there's a recent article coming out, it's only available for first online, which is called the Silicon Valley effect. So the author shows that Silicon Valley, standing for some of those big AI companies, big tech companies, have been able to influence even the way the media portray this problem, and then how we are all starting to talk about it, even lawmakers and regulators. And that is one criticism I have. This dominant narrative was in a way influenced by this thought of competition, like we're competing to develop AI, and that gives us an advantage in the future global economy. We could even discuss, I think it would be interesting to know whether in economics this competition is actually leading to good outcomes. I also read about management suggesting to talk about co-opetition instead of competition. So cooperation and competition. And I always mention Macau is a good place actually where we see that Macau doesn't have a competition law, but it has the concessions, which I think fulfill a similar role. And then you have the casinos, which are in the process of competition and cooperation. Only competition doesn't work very often because it may lead to monopolies, and then once you reach a monopoly, there's no more incentive to innovate. And then we have Nokia or other examples which lose the race in a way. So we should also ask ourselves, I'm personally very interested in trade. Is trade a means to a certain end, or is trade an end in itself? Is it enough to do trade, or what do we want to achieve with that? So I think also today this debate about AI should be not framed as just a race towards developing AI or regulating AI, but it should be a reflection on what do we want to achieve and what for, where are we going with it. And therefore I'm very critical also, I must say, of academics in particular, like this book here, Digital Empires. I mean, it's not the best terminology to talk about the future with terms from the past, or the subtitle, The Global Battle to Regulate Technology. I think regulation should avoid battles and not like battle to regulate. And I personally, I'm very biased. I'm very fascinated by the power of language and how especially law relies a lot on language. But language is also much more than just text. It's communication, it's flow of information. And I think we should pay very much attention to that. And luckily, I'm not the only one who thinks that. There's even earlier articles I found, 2016, that this race towards regulation or something, or developing it, racing it doesn't guarantee quality, and it doesn't guarantee positive outcomes, as we know also from similar races like arms race, space race. It very often leads to rather rivalry or disaster than a sustainable development. So I think we should be very cautious in this respect. And part of this is also, we should even challenge the notion of AI. In fact, I think not enough thought has been given initially to the notion of it, because it already, choosing this term, has created a kind of impression that it is an intelligence. But we should even still raise the question, what is intelligence? Because we refer to a human privilege without knowing what human intelligence is. So it is not a good starting point for like trying to understand the meaning of a new phenomenon if we don't even understand the underlying metaphor. So from that perspective, AI, and I will come later with a better alternative that someone else proposed. But this race has been going on. I think this is, everybody knows already the kind of chronology, but it's rapidly changing. Like the US executive order has been repealed, and so it's coming, it's going, it's being planned to be enforced, not enforced, we don't know. That's why I think AI regulation is in trouble in many ways, and I have tried to change the focus from regulation to education in a way, and I want to show why I think that is the case, namely that there are some specific developments in AI in combination with other technologies which I think pose serious threats. And they are also not only posing threats, they're also providing opportunities, of course, because they are in many ways, I think, changing, potentially changing our understanding of human nature, human intelligence. But with that comes also the danger of, in a way, ending or harming or eroding what is human intelligence, what we very often hear then in the form of like human beings being replaced by artificial intelligence. So here, again, this quote, which is why I was very interested in these prohibited AI systems, because they have kind of 4 categories initially that the EU proposed. And the first one is, in my view, the scientifically, also from the perspective of human evolution, the most exciting one, because it really relates to human perception and the functioning of the brain. So here we have the context of regulating a technology, but it is a technology that actually, I think, is, if this is possible, is capable of directly interfering with human intelligence. And not only directly, but also subliminally, and that means one is not even aware of it. That's what it means. It's below the threshold of the awareness. And then they proposed at the time 3 more categories. Briefly, an AI system that does exactly the same, but it exploits vulnerabilities. I've also critically commented on that because I think, first of all, they could have been put together in some way, and I'm not sure that singling out specific groups of persons like children, older people, creates a kind of false impression of safety. Because I think, oh, I'm not a kid, I'm not too old, I'm still safe. But in fact, I think exploiting vulnerabilities also includes the possibility to create a vulnerability, and then everybody is vulnerable, and we should be cautious in the use of, or in what we do with these things. And then there was also one for AI systems used by public authorities to kind of evaluate behavior, social credit scoring or something like that, and biometric identification systems. During the process from the launch of the proposal to the final version that entered into force last August of the AI Act in the European Union, it was expanded to 8 categories. And my impression is, to some extent, that it looks, there are some points that were very positive, but generally it gives the impression that it is now broader in terms of protection, because you have 8, more is better than less. But to some extent, when we look at the technologies, the underlying technologies, my impression is, and we can maybe later also ask a visiting professor we have here from the University of Vienna, who's also an expert on law and technology, whether she shares this impression that by broadening the scope, but narrowing it down into smaller categories, perhaps it is harder for a real life situation of the use of such a technology in combination with others to actually fall within the prohibition, any of them. So it might violate the spirit of most of them, but actually not fulfill the criteria of a single one, and then the regulation would be in vain. And I just want to mention also that this was foreseen, for example, in another international document, the Framework Convention prepared by the Council of Europe, which is open for signatories from all around the world, whoever wants can. And they had such a proposal to have the same prohibition of some of these categories. In the negotiation process, however, it disappeared. And I heard it was largely the influence of the United States trying to remove those restrictive provisions because of the desire to develop the technology. So I think this first one, I just take it now tonight as a kind of symbolic for the change in the technology that may potentially also trigger a change in the understanding of human intelligence. And I must say, what fascinated me the most about doing research on this is I learned a lot about myself in terms of how does the mind work, for example. I always heard, have you heard this neuro myth that we are only using 10% of our brain? Has anyone heard that? Do you believe that? Exactly. There's even a paper I found from the OECD, I don't know why they were concerned with neuromyths like this, where they say this is a myth, it's not true. But what I learned in the process of looking into kind of systems or subliminal perception, what we are aware of and what we are not aware of, we are apparently in most contexts only aware of 5% of the processes, the cognitive ones that are happening in our mind. So I believe since then, I don't know if it's correct entirely, but I think we use 100% of our brain every day and during night and day. But what we are aware of is only between 5 to 10%. And it depends a bit on what you're doing. If it's something you're familiar with, it is less awareness, which is why we are actually becoming better when you're not overthinking things. Think of learning a sport for the first time. It's hard because you think what I should do. And when you've played tennis for 20 years, you're no longer thinking and you're better. And that is an interesting thing I learned. But what is also coming with this, of course, is not only does it give us, I think, the possibility to enhance the understanding of our mind, and it's already difficult to control our own mind, but it also gives others and other things or other people the possibility to control the mind for you and what you're thinking. And currently I'm really wondering in many ways to what extent a lot of public debates precisely on the topic of AI are already very strongly and very accurately directed in certain directions that we are supposed to look and the way we talk about it. So in this context, I just want to summarize briefly here this simple effort at the time to regulate a system of an AI, a kind of technology, through the law, make sure to protect people against the unwanted, unacceptable risks that it may pose against, especially for the protection of certain fundamental rights, like our freedom of thought, which is in a way also supporting the idea of we are having autonomy, free will, and self-determination. And what is very interesting, because the Commission proposed to prohibit only systems that are below that threshold of awareness. And then I was very curious, where is that? Where is that? When am I aware and when am I unaware? And then I looked into this, and it was very interesting that there was nothing in the law that would define any of these terms. What is subliminal? What is, which senses, for example, are involved? And that was also very interesting to see. And Macau is a very nice place to study. I even wrote in one chapter about Macau's legal systems from the perspective of the different senses. That the law is not only in the basic law, it's also, there are symbols like the regional flag, very unique. We have the national flag, the regional flag. Then we have an anthem, like the music, so sound. And then the Macau casinos, for example, I think they use different fragrances in the air conditioning, which has a conditioning effect that you eat well, you go to the cinema, you feel good, and then you remember that, and you associate that with the good experience, and when you go there again, you want to have the same again, and it has this effect in many ways. And it is known in marketing that the more senses that are included in a sensation, the more memorable it is, and the more likely it is that you're coming back. So there are a lot of things that I must say I've never thought of, and I've never been actually taught about the senses in school or in any subject. And for lawyers, I think it is also extremely important because our brain is also manipulating a lot of information we see. For example, one example I read, which is also fun, is there's one thing that is constantly in front of us and we are not seeing it. You know what it is? The nose, exactly, yes. You have to focus on it to actually see it. But, and then we have a blind spot, also in the eye, where there's something we don't see, but then the mind makes us see it. So the mind is a great manipulator, and we know that in the meantime, that only relying on one sense cannot be very reliable at times. But in law, evidence derives from the Latin word to see, shows that there's still this belief, seeing is believing, and not necessarily other senses. And then there are also very difficult questions about which of these systems fall within that from a technical perspective. I just want to show briefly this. I already mentioned, only this was, I found several sources saying that we are apparently only using a very small percentage of those cognitive processes that that are going on, we are aware of. And I think this is something quite interesting, because that could possibly, from a perspective of education, if we can train or we use AI to enhance this percentage, would we get better control over our lives? I mean, that is something that interests me a lot currently, in terms of the 10% or 5% we are aware of. Very often we want something and then something doesn't turn out the way we wanted it. Was it the other 95% that dominated this kind of and led to the outcome that my awareness was maybe not happy with? So there is a wonderful movie, I don't know if anyone saw it, Lucy, some years ago, where a woman, I think she by accident swallows some substance which enhances the awareness, and then she goes from 5% to 100%, and then her abilities, physical, mental, and everything changes. And I think in a way these movies very often are based on a lot of scientific observations with some speculations about the future. And they turn out in many ways to be true. We have a lot of science fiction that is nowadays no longer fiction, just science. And there's a long history of this. I will not mention that. I think you're aware of it, but the point is this, because for 50, 60 years, the question whether subliminal advertising functions and is effective was a kind of controversy. And I think this issue has been settled pretty much now, at least from 2006 and 2011. I found sources that clearly say it's no longer a question whether it works. It's now the question of how can we make it more accurate in achieving the outcome we want. So it means we retain information that we sense subliminally, but maybe I'm not going to buy a drink because I saw a drink, but because there are, for example, other conditions that have to be in place. Like if you're thirsty, you're probably more vulnerable to buying or to fall for a drinking advertisement than for a car ad or something. But when you're looking for a car, maybe you go and buy that car that was subliminally shown to you in some form or the other. So, and the second thing, that is why I'm also not happy with the current way how this debate is framed. It is the combination of many technologies that is in many ways, I think, the challenge in the future, and not just an isolated, because AI alone, I think, is not the threat itself. And I think also it should be discussed in the context of other similar technologies, like, of course, big data, and then virtual reality, extended reality. And I think I see, I don't know if you share that, but I see a desire here behind that to completely and artificially rebuild the entire human being. So like big data is the memory, AI is the brain, and then virtual reality or extended reality are all the senses. And here too, I think we need to work still much more in terms of studying the senses, not only in isolation, because I read in the history it was a trend to look at them in isolation separately. But there is a condition like called synesthesia, where people associate different senses. You can hear music, see colors, or there are hundreds of forms of different forms. One is some people can see the space and time in space in front of them, the calendar, you organize it. And what I recently read is also very fascinating, that when you are growing up with a language that is written from left to right, you are more likely to say, for example, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. But when you write the other direction, you rather say Monday, Tuesday. And Chinese, for example, I heard is more like, or in front and back. I don't know if everybody can test it, how you would say, like, you know, Monday to Friday or Friday to Monday, back and forth. But all these factors have a huge impact on our behavior. So language and culture even. And I think when you know these, a lot of these things, you can, of course, enhance the way you manipulate people in the way you want. So just to tell you also one thing, this is very important. I find that I was looking for this question, where is that line for every sense? And there's a field of study called psychophysics, and they come to the conclusion basically that such threshold also doesn't exist. So that because not only is everyone a bit different, but each one of us is different also depending on what you're doing, when you're doing it, whether you're awake or tired, etc., etc. So it is, in fact, a category that the law uses that doesn't exist in many ways. And what I was surprised myself in the end, because in my book I said it should actually be either called transliminal, it goes across both those kind of processes that we are aware of, because of course you see advertising also in the street or on social media that is not subliminal, and other factors we are not aware of. And now the Commission, actually very strange, that's why I lost a little bit my faith in the regulation as a chance to deal with that, is they had the time from 2021 when they released the draft, then they amended it, enacted it in August last year, and actually this part, Article 5, only entered into force in February. And the same day they issued guidelines trying to explain what is subliminal technique. And then they say it's something that operates both below and beyond the awareness. My Latin would say sub means below and not beyond either. So here's this guideline where they say that. And I criticized that already before. So I think they had time to do that even before they enacted the law. But anyways, just briefly, subliminal AI systems, this is also something that is evolving on a constant basis. In just 2-3 years, I think a lot has happened there. I found in the literature also that a lot of kind of research is using different terms. One, especially in the design of websites, is dark patterns. It is all kind of sophisticated ways to guide and force you into certain behaviors, like you know it from websites. You want something, and then you have to click on this. You first have to give also an email address, maybe, and then there are additional hidden prices, and it coerces you softly, first nudges you, and so on, and then forces you at the end. You have to accept it. And we saw that, I mean, all of us probably booking a flight. First it says it costs 99 patacas, and then by the end the check-in fee and this fee and that fee, and you pay 999, and then it's a very different story. And I always use this example here from a friend's hotel in Macau. In fact, this is, I think, what would be a dark pattern in a way that it uses psychology, a bit red, like it makes you worried, you know, like popular, if you really want to come to Macau, and then you're stressed that you may no longer get a good hotel room with a good rate, but then it says, it's very cheap today. And then lawyers might get worried about cancellation, but it says no risk in green, and in the end you click and you buy it. And this is, I think, would be some kind of simple psychology to lure you to accept this offer. There's nothing subliminal here, really, although we could also say, like, colors, for example, color tones have an effect on us, we know that. Maybe this is already something we're not aware of when we book something like that. But then I came across this study, I like this one a lot, where they used test persons and they showed the videos to one group of the same room, just the room, 360 degree, and this one with a smiley embedded subliminally, so just flashed for an instance, and then these test persons always had a higher percentage choosing this room as opposed to others. So if a smiley has that effect, then we can assume that it can work. And then there are other studies that are more serious, where they showed and tried to kind of create experiments in laboratories with all kinds of the combination of different technologies with brain scans and so on, together with big data stored, etc. And the interesting thing is what this article said is that some of these stimuli can be used also in a way that is subliminal. And with that, it is possible to hack into the brain and extract very sensitive personal information. So in a way, we are, I think, already in a very interesting time where things can become quite like manipulative in positive and in negative ways. And there's a new development, I think we see it here, I don't know if it works, with these reels. No, it doesn't work. I don't know how to start with this, but basically you all have in your social media feed reels. This is just one example where there's an embedded message subliminal. You can see it flat. I don't know if it works, yeah. I don't know if you detect something. Did you see a text in white? Very good, yes. It says made in America. It was funny, I showed it in class and then some people said made in China. But it stopped it, it says made in America. So what this shows is that, and this is the combination in particular with here, this is an image of generative AI. So someone prompted this, and I don't know if you see there's a subliminal text. Yeah, exactly. You can see when it fades out, the black is actually okay. So now I think with generative AI, you can, I haven't tried it myself yet fully, but you can create visuals and sound possibly too with such embedded messages. And that is, of course, a big question whether this will be used and will be effective in manipulating people's behavior. And I think the main challenge here I see is from this article before and so on, there are rapid developments, but they're all related. And I think with that, the chance of hacking into the brain is becoming more and more efficient and also like accurate in many ways. And that brings me to the last point, which is why I think now, at least what I've observed, is that the awareness about it is already a protection, I think. And that respect the law of the EU, especially this draft in 2021, was very important, because it was important to launch a debate, and debate increases awareness, and otherwise we would not have had this debate, in fact, that we have today. Now I'm also wondering, of course, it's not enough to be aware. We probably also need to sharpen our senses to be immune to these kind of effects that it has. And even the UNESCO recommendation on the ethics of AI actually calls on all the members to raise the awareness about the AI and the dangers, and it gives a lot of detailed advice what we should do. It even becomes a little bit more specific, AI literacy, education to the public. And I think I must say that in the last 2-3 years when I engage with these questions with students, I think it is helpful, but it might not be enough. And then also, how exactly should I train students, or my children also, I'm worried about them as well, or myself, in becoming more immune in many ways to that. And here is a bit more like detailed information what we should teach, for example, in terms of AI education, basic literacy, numeracy, coding, digital skills, that's the technical, but then also critical and creative thinking. I hope I did that in the past. I don't know. And then also communication, teamwork, social, emotional, and AI ethics skills. I would add a few things, like I just showed also, like I think I learned a lot from the debate about the senses and marketing. It's very interesting in a way, because this is also important for, in law, we have this debate about nudging, for example, that you use other methods, not just punishment or something, but you manipulate in many ways. Have you realized now in Macau, for example, I noticed driving, there, I don't know who was responsible for it, but the roads before the zebra crossings have now squares that are painted and getting bigger. And it's a bit like a head-up display in a car, or like a virtual video game, because when you approach, they become bigger, and it has the effect of slowing you down. You know, so it's a very interesting visual, of course, way, and also more lines have haptic, like when you cross the line, you can hear the vibration. So this is exactly where actually we can, I think, use a lot the senses to achieve results and outcomes that we don't need actually to necessarily enforce laws or even formulate them in detailed ways. I think there are many other ways to convince and nudge in some directions. I think also Singapore is a very interesting example that, especially I think for Macau, we have a lot of similarities in many ways. But they, I think, use a lot also education. But they have a very comprehensive strategy, actually. Here is just some excerpt from the more recent one from 2023, the national strategy they formulated in terms of how to use AI. Although I'm not sure with, there are also a lot of conferences on AI for good. I think here, I believe we are facing many dilemmas. In fact, it's no longer easy. It has never been easy to say exactly what is good and bad, I think. But especially with something like AI, which is an oxymoron in many ways, which defies this binary, what is it, machine or human, to speak of that for good. But of course, we need to start with the intention, although there's a saying in my language that the way to hell starts with good intentions. So I don't know. Anyways, I think it's important to have a comprehensive strategy. And that is where in education, I think, starts. I think with education, we need to change also the way, that's what I've been trying to do since I'm teaching in many ways, that I feel we have, because of certain patterns of thinking, because of how we look at the senses, we also have created a world that is very often fragmented, and we believe there are no linkages between what we see and what we hear, but there are. And so I think we probably do not sense and see and understand the complexity of life in many ways. And now we are replicating, interestingly, the complexity of life in technology, because the technology is converging much more into a virtual, extended or augmented reality than we are aware of. But we are fascinated by putting on Apple Vision Pro helmets or something to see the virtual reality basically replicating the real reality. But when we are in the reality, we fragmented it again, and we are not capable of seeing this. We're not having the same fascination. Actually, it's a very strange kind of paradox. Also, I find in the past there was this paradox that we seem to treat legally anything that happens in the virtual world very different to what happens in the real world. So there's this debate about, for example, whether the training of AI, of large language models, should allow the use of copyright-protected materials. This was almost every second project report is about that in many ways. Should we allow, should we not? I received an email from one of my publishers, only one, strangely, saying about an old book that I published 7 years ago, do you want it included? And then you get 20% of the royalties the publisher receives from allowing the training of these models using my book. I wrote back and I said, is it negotiable, the percentage? They said no. I said, okay, include it. And now I just got my royalty statement. There was nothing on it, so they probably haven't. They already trained it before, maybe. At least this time there was nothing. It would have been interesting how much it would be, 20% of what. But in any event, we see here that there are some analogies in a way, like people said, like, what if I go into a bookstore and I take all the books and then I don't pay and I leave the store? It's certainly theft. Whereas in the digital world, it is you're an innovator, you're a genius or something. And it is not clear whether we have properly applied, I think, the existing laws to some of these phenomena. And at the time when ChatGPT was launched, I was sitting with a lawyer in Rome, and he said, it's impressive that you can launch a product globally without any restrictions, because if in Rome you want to open an ice cream store, it takes 2 years to get all the permits, and you have a lot of conditions to meet. So basically, I think I am now more interested, in fact, in how can we use AI, and if we call it AI, to enhance self-awareness in many ways and maybe augment intelligence. So that is one of the proposals I will mention. I just want to show, like, some have gone very far, comparing like the accuracy of these technologies to the way we programmed computers, and now we can even put the same, although the computer not always does what we want it to do, but it's very often quite a high percentage, and I think we are approaching that too. And that's why I concluded in my book at the time that Orwell said in 1948 that private life came to an end, and now with interactive and persuasive technologies and all these possibilities of neurotechnologies in particular, I think privacy of thought is already a kind of endangered species in many ways. And I find that would be really something, but that is beyond my field of research. It would be very interesting to see to what extent these, for example, large language models use already different forms. And now the interesting thing is there also, I forgot to mention, is that they started as text chatbots basically, and then they moved to multimodal, multisensory. You could upload sound, images. So they also follow this trend of converging the senses. And to what extent they already have an impact on and could be used to manipulate public opinion. And that is, I think, something we should be concerned with, because I see, at least within the AI debate in the academics, most of us, we have accepted all these terms without the critical reflection on, should we really call it AI? I even have difficulties to remind myself, well, it's an oxymoron, it's a contradiction, maybe it's something else, right? So here, for example, this article is very good, I think, from 2023. The title is It's an Oxymoron. I was very happy because I wrote this book thinking that more and more such contradictions in terms are arising in the beginning of the 21st century. And he says, in fact, that intelligence is a complicated matter, that, to say the least. It's something we don't really understand. It has multiple dimensions. And then how can we call a machine something that we don't even know what it really is? So I think we should rethink the use of AI, the uncritical use, and maybe find other ways. And there is the other term. This is an article I found recently using artificial intelligence or intelligence augmentation, IA, actually. And I like that. I think the real purpose of AI is IA, to augment intelligence in a way, or intelligence augmentation. Then it becomes, or if you call it AI, I mean, depends which one you put first. But the meaning should be augmented intelligence or intelligence augmentation rather than artificial intelligence, which suggests this is something superior to humans instead of aiding it to enhance our own understanding, if you know what I mean. So I think the answer to the question today for me is not either or, because oxymoron tell us it can be both. And I think we need urgently more awareness, more education. I hope, at least in the university when I teach and so on, but even beyond, I think I'm thinking here very much also of younger children, my children in particular. In schools, we see there are extremely worrisome developments with the use of just internet or social media, and how I see how addictive they are, even on myself. So I think we need to step up the efforts to protect ourselves from the kind of more and more intrusive possibilities that AI in combination with other technologies are providing. So we should be very cautious about it. Otherwise, we have an outcome like this. In fact, I just bought a car that is called Smart. So I'm worried that I will be one with a smart car, maybe a smart watch I don't have yet. And then I'm the only idiot in a very smart environment and in a smart city, right? And that should not happen. And there is a very good book I read recently, this one, Your Stone Age Brain in the Screen Age. Unfortunately, I'm not from this field of, and this is very interesting because this author has written a lot about the senses before. I knew his works from the interaction between the senses, and now he shows in this book how actually the developers of many of these systems and applications know exactly, they trace the evolution of the human brain and use that knowledge of our instincts, the reflexes that used to protect us against a dinosaur or a bear in front of the cave, to keep us hooked to these devices. And it works, apparently, I think. And especially with eye tracking and so on, all these studies, you know how to keep the attention. And what strikes me too is, in many ways, that there is this hype about AI becoming smarter and smarter. I've seen it in several conferences already, tables like this, where AI is becoming so much smarter, apparently. But most tables say human intelligence is not progressing. And then I thought, like, why did I do a PhD even? Like, if I knew it will never change, why bother, no? So why do we assume that it's not possible to at least enhance or augment human intelligence by the use of different tools like we have used before? So I think we should put it balance, or put it back in balance, in a way that we do not just look at the tool, but we also look at our own well-being in many ways and performances here. And it's very interesting. I don't know if you know, Ngram Viewer is just showing how often a certain word shows up in those books that Google has scanned. And it was striking. I tried it out with human intelligence and artificial intelligence. And I find it in a way sad that there's clearly a hype, and then now a more recent hype about artificial intelligence, but the interest in human intelligence remains pretty much flat. And I just bought a book, How to Think About AI, but by a prominent lawyer writing about new technologies, the future of lawyers. And in the whole book, How to Think About AI, he uses 3 times the term human intelligence. So there is clearly this emphasis on the external, the tool, rather than the internal and our own intelligence. And now I'm working on another book, in a way, trying to train maybe new forms of perception. And from a rather old book on paradoxes, or the paradoxical process, is a book, How to Think Creatively, and this is what also the UNESCO recommendation says, provides this puzzle. I don't know if at that time I showed it already. I don't know if anyone seen it, no? So the point is, you can try it out. You have 6 coins, if you can put them in front of you or in your mind. And how can you rearrange the 6 coins in a way to make 2 rows of each, with 4 each? Yes. Who has the solution? Well, you can ask AI. They will probably they will have already kind of scraped through the book from which I took it, and then the solution. Well, the idea is, does anyone have an idea? It is, we are used to, this is also what has been called lateral thinking. There are many words for this: creative thinking, lateral thinking, thinking outside the box, for example, is that this is placed on a surface, on a table, and in order to transcend, you have the solution, the problem, you have to lift it on a higher dimension, to a higher understanding. And when you take this coin and you place it in the middle here, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you have 2 rows of 4 each. But the trick is that do you understand? That you transcend, you move it from a 2-dimensional surface to a 3-dimensional surface. So I like this as an analogy, because I think we are at the time, like Einstein and Minkowski and others have argued, where we are starting to transcend the 3-dimensional space, and we're looking for a 4th dimension. So I like this example as a good way to visualize, in a way that we will probably gain a much better understanding of our reality, potentially one day, if we manage to have access to another dimension. And what is interesting, I mean, Einstein and Minkowski, they said it's a space-time continuum. And I was in a conference in Beijing, and there was a scholar from Yale who said, like, we have now conquered space. The world, we have conquered it with cyberspace, even a spaceless space in many ways, and we're even moving beyond the planet and so on. But we are facing a problem of time. That was my thought immediately. And we have actually, even the terminology that we use, like the prohibition of biometrics, is real time, right? Everything is happening now in real time. And we feel the time is shrinking, actually, and almost disappearing. There's a paradox, too, here, that the faster you go, that should mean you save time. If you be home faster, you have more time at home. But strangely, the opposite happens in your kind of sensation. And we have enhanced transportation. Like I came to China first time, and it took me 2 weeks to go from Beijing to Vienna in 1986. And now I went from Guangzhou to Wuhan in less than 4 hours. But the irony, the paradox is that we actually all complain we have no more time. So I think this is why I believe we should now start also looking at science, which are scientific discoveries from 100 years ago, and take them seriously. There's a very interesting literature on how to maybe transcend the limitations of space and time. But that is just one example, and I hope, I thank you very much for your time to come here, and I hope we can have a discussion and your impressions. So thank you very much. I hope it. Anyone?
Thank you so much. It's really interesting because it raises a lot of concerned matters, raises a lot of things that we never thought about, maybe, but which I find fascinating. You express here the importance of awareness as a way of self-awareness, as you mean, also relating with the law. I mean, in individual awareness for us to stay safe from things that we cannot control on a daily basis or hourly basis, minute basis. Collective awareness by implementing regulations, laws, and this kind of things that protect us as all as a society, which is rather important. How the both things manage, how both things relate and coexist is something that it's interesting to think about as well. This brings us to something that is we are facing the creation of reality, or we are facing the creation of realities that we are not aware of, how these things. And then we face and we jump into something that perhaps is more challenging. And nowadays we talk a lot about these kind of things, about the creation of truth. How shall we understand it? So it's my simple question: how can we understand the creation of reality and the creation of truth?
That's a question for another time. But yeah, no, it's already very. I'm very happy that this question is raised. I mean, because otherwise we are simply like floating in a river without any control over the direction of where we are going in many ways. And I think this is what I appreciate about the whole kind of analysis or study of these phenomena, that it seems that there is in some way in this chaotic world, or some call it even post-truth world, where we're not even looking for truth, it's already past that moment, that there is maybe a bigger plan in a way. And I think this provides some kind of also relief to anxieties that come from a world that is largely uncertain. And now, I mean, even in my field, like, trade law was supposed to provide some certainty since 1947, the GATT and the WTO, and now every morning you wake up and you don't know what's going on. So here, I think technologies are actually a reflection of, I think, maybe some desires. I think the success of this device, it's not only bad, the success is that it allows us to do things that we have either dreamt of, like telepathy. I can communicate with people far away with my thoughts, my feelings. I remember My grandmother used to have that gift to whenever I was in trouble, she would call me from very far away, and she would know and immediately call and hear from my voice and say what's wrong or something. And now we can do that because of that technology. And on top of it, I think possibly it has another effect. I mean, already at the time it wasn't a mobile phone, but I had a landline. And because of the phone, my grandmother could prove to me scientifically in a way that it is possible. Without the phone, she would have thought about me, I would have thought about her, she would have felt I was maybe in trouble, but we couldn't verify it. So I think we should use these technologies now, and we can look much deeper into many hidden corners of the brain to bring it to the fore, make use of it in terms of raising awareness, because I think we need to step up the game ourselves. I do not trust the machine to take control over neither my life nor collectively. So that's the best way I see to make sure that it fulfills the real function that it has and why we are trying to do it. Of course, you can also use it for, commercial gains and so on, but maybe evolution is a far more complex process. Maybe that is part of it to make it keep us going, but it's not the only way. At least that's what I'm concerned with. But thank you. That's as far as it gets at the moment. I hope I will have some more questions about that, especially with new studies coming in that field.
Sorry to raise a question. So
yeah, no, sorry.
Thank you. Interesting that I believe that you deserve questions. So
thank you.
No, I'm not at ease with this. When I remember that 50 years ago, people would say, "Oh, computers will never replace the human." 30 years ago, "Oh, there has been a lot of progress, but the computers will never be able to match the human mind." And so I can leap 30 years and say, where are we going? Because I cannot manage to digest everything. And I'm losing in the competition with the machine because my memory is limited. And I have a good memory. But my memory cannot compare with anything, including the artificial world.
Yes.
And this worries me, really.
Yes.
I wonder whether you have heard or whether you know works of a Portuguese doctor in the state, Damasio, Antonio Damasio. He wrote a book a long time ago, now more than 20 years ago, about 30 years ago, called The Mistake of Descartes. Because it says Descartes was purely rationalist.
Yes.
And the brain also has sensations. So we cannot divide. Part of it is the soul, and the other part is the physical world. And he has after that, he has made further investigation. He still lives in the States. It's really a big brain.
Great.
Natural intelligence.
I will look at it. Yeah, thank you very much.
Damasio.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you will use some of his research to your future developments. But then, of course, in terms of memory, I cannot compare. I don't think any human being can compare with with the world that lies ahead of us in terms of artificial intelligence. So the AI will always have an advantage on the human being. I would like you to say no.
I will say,
yes,
but I wait for it.
I would have my mind more at ease if you tell me, don't worry, this will not happen. You just mentioned something I will not be controlled by this thing you have there. Now, I don't use this thing nowadays. I don't use it as a phone. I use it very seldom as a phone. I use it as a phone. But I use it to many more functions that are not the in the phone feature. Okay, so because it has become a tool for many things. I need to know knowledge access, immediate access. And I can confess that I'm getting lazier. I'm getting lazier. Before I used to know by heart tens, not to say hundreds of phone numbers. Not nowadays,
Yes,
because they
yes.
are all in there.
Exactly, yes.
Now, to get for information, I would go to Wikipedia, to dictionaries, and so on. Now, I don't need to do that. I ask Copilot, I ask DeepSeek, and they tell me everything. But there is a big difference. I don't take that knowledge that comes to that. It will not be retained as long as when I had to go through the dictionary in alphabetic order, looking for words and so on, and new words and the new knowledge. This is not happening nowadays, and I'm afraid of losing the limited qualities I had, and that I see that they are not becoming enlarged or enhanced. On the contrary. So I won't monopolize. So, but you have enough to tell me that I don't have to worry. Thank you.
Thank you
and
very
thank
much.
you for.
No, in fact, yes. I don't know if that helps, but even this is known as the Google effect, for example, on the brain. That your memory now you rely. I know it happened to me in class. The students started it. You know, like I said, the World Trade Organization was created in 1993, and then someone said, no, on Wikipedia it says 1995 in front of me, and then I'm like, ooh, I don't remember, and you can in real time verify all this. So why memorize it? In fact, yes, and it seems so we store less of this in our short term. But that could be also a positive thing in a way. And actually, what I also learned from the director here in the United Nations University Institute, and that these data, the problem of these systems is that they can't forget, so they don't empty the bin from time to time, and that's what apparently our brain does a lot when we are sleeping. That we filter out what is useless. And I have to do it with my computer also all the time. So this is a good analogy there. And maybe that if we use less energy on memory, maybe we develop new abilities. And this also relates to your first question in a way, because I think there are some books, Faster or The Disappearance of Time and so on. It seems that the time is shrinking. And with that, I think an interesting phenomenon starts where we are possibly also more in control again of our lives. Because before maybe you set something in motion and it took years for it to materialize. Now it becomes faster, and then we can oversee the development. And in that way, we can be like a self-fulfilling prophecy, for example. So, but if this is faster, and if you're not like hindered by some processing of all these data, and we also, I think in computer science, sometimes less data can be more. Again, the quantity is not enough. We need good data also. So maybe the same analogy works for us, that less processing or cognitive energy being used for storage, you can maybe use it to discover new dimensions. Because I think we have probably lost a lot of abilities due to a lot of technologies. I mean, the car was also always faster than us, and we are becoming maybe lazier in terms of walking. But that gave us maybe other abilities and so on. But I think I don't want to leave it just to the technology. I think we need personally, and also in educational institutions in particular, but also I think governments like Singapore showed, like, I mean, you need a strategy to also create the conditions for that. Otherwise, when the conditions are not good, it's not very likely that evolution just brings it somehow out on its own. So I think, but thank you very much. I don't know if I have and lawyers also, by the way, we have the right to forget, like it's very important. So it's not bad to, there's a beautiful oxymoron is remember forgetting.
Well, I'm just saying that I'm being a little bold because I could not come in time to see all your presentation, but still bold enough to make a question.
Excellent, thank you.
So it's one reflection for you to comment and one question. The first one is, I always have difficulties understanding why people put now the competition between human intelligence and artificial intelligence. Because human strength, for instance, is also limited. And we invented machines that surpass our strength much. We have the bulldozers, the caterpillars, that do things that we, humanity, impossible. And you always look at them as a tool, not as a competitor. So this looking at artificial intelligence as a competitor to the human intelligence, for me, it makes not much sense, because I look more at it as a tool that amplifies our own intelligence. So this is just,
thank you,
I would like you to comment on this. The second point is exactly related with your question, with your final question about educate or regulate. So educate or regulate is the question, and I would like you to tell me what you prefer. Although I think that we should do both things. We should educate and we should also regulate.
Yeah, I think. But thank you very much. That was my answer. I think we need to do both. I mean, that's what I learned from Oxymora in particular, and paradoxes, and all these phenomena now, that it doesn't fit into this like either-or thinking only. This is useful. This has been a very useful process in the past, and we should not give it up. We still need to start from, is it this or is it that? Is it good, is it bad, etc. But it's not the end of the story either. That's what I'm saying. And I believe, like with the other example, transcending certain dimensions can give us new information about it, and then we will see that, oh, something is coming from that development that enhances our understanding. And that brings me back to what your first point is. I recently had in my I don't know which algorithm, based on what, on my research or something, but I had a reel showing me Bill Gates saying that in the future we don't need lawyers anymore. And I felt exactly like you, that I say, like, I mean, why do we already put it above the, or even we had a meeting once in the university where we discussed what shall we do with AI? Should we allow students to use it or prohibit it, and so on? Then someone said, like, maybe we should let students write, and then AI will correct it. And then I said, no, we should like do the opposite. Like, we should like let AI do the first thing, and then we check whether it is accurate or not. So I agree with you, and I'm afraid that's what I said before. I think there is a narrative that is like with intention promoting the idea that this is not a machine like other tools before, like a knife. I mean, every tool had aspects where it was, I mean, the car is better, is faster than us, there's no doubt, but that doesn't make it more efficient or as a person, right? So to elevate a tool, an object to something else is a mistake. And I think I read one, I forgot where this article was that I read. I think one of the other points that we need to consider here is that we also, I think, redefine probably not only our understanding of what is human intelligence, but we also need to redefine, and maybe that's also something we need to learn from AI, the place of humans in our environment, vis-a-vis plants, animals, because to assume we are the only ones intelligent, you know, like, is also maybe something not sustainable in the future. Or the question of, is there alien intelligence, right? Some have answered that by saying we haven't seen it yet because we are not intelligent enough to detect them, right? So there are a lot of interesting debates that need to be, I think, had. So I'm grateful to be here and to Thank you very much for your questions. Ah, okay. And because that is what the real incentive of this machine should be.
Thank you very much for a very inspiring talk. I always like your optimism. I'm a bit less optimistic than you are. So my team in Vienna did research on how well different large language models like ChatGPT, BART, and Gemini are doing in our exams. And they passed almost all our exams. They didn't do that well, but so almost better than 80% of our students. And if these systems are better than 80% of our students, I think we are in trouble. So, and it's not going to be enough to say, well, the AI does the exam, and then we are the ones correcting it. I mean, if they do better than our students, how are they going to correct it? You might be able to correct it, but how are we going to teach our students to work with that?
I know, I heard that a lot, and I was struggling with an answer to that question because it's true. But I mean, now I would also say, like, maybe, I mean, what I have done in the courses I'm teaching currently is I changed the exam. I mean, maybe the exams are no longer up to the challenges the reality actually poses. So, yeah, exactly. Yes, yeah, exactly. So I have, and again, I think there are many new skills that we need to train. Like, I mean, and it's good that even UNESCO, I mean, mentions some of them, but the problem is there's a lot of talk, but how to exemplify it? I like a lot this experiment, and I don't know, with the coins, you know, this is something that in me triggered a curiosity about transcending the limits, and I think that's what I see is the role of university, of legal education too. It's not about training the lawyer of now. It's I don't know. I have to be careful with a former student now sitting here, but the goal was always to prepare for the next, for the future, and not just for a short term of the present. So. It is important to be ready also to, I mean, rethink the tests, I would say. And I think that includes law schools too, and other schools as well. I don't know. What do you suggest? What do you do?
Well, we try to change our testing modes, but the models keep on being better.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Although we could also, of course, discuss what is better. I mean, that is, you know, Einstein was said to have failed in math and then gave us the theories that maybe redefine our understanding. Maybe failing is succeeding. I don't know. Yeah? Thank you.
More like what I've learned from you today, like AI is oxymoron, which is very true. So how do we just take the most and take the benefit by having it around? It's inevitable that it affects our lives. So for example, recently I was looking for a hotel in China. So based on my filter, they gave me some choices. And they give me actually a button for DeepSeek. So I can see the analyze or suggestions, pros and cons, and it's like a few thousand words. I spend all this time reading it, and then at the end, I make my decision based on how the bathroom looks like. So besides all the intelligence, we have emotions. So we don't totally depend on you know, technology. So I think I'm not that hopeless. I think we have a chance to survive because, you know, we live in the world with human beings, you know, not all computers.
Yes. Absolutely, but I'm afraid that actually in this respect, our education is, for example, is too focused on the rational and not the emotional, for example. I mean, it's interesting, you know, like I learned why I wrote a book about oxymoron was like I counted more and more of them, and one of them was emotional intelligence is an oxymoron, because we actually designed first tests like intelligence tests, and then certain groups did better than others, because those groups who, it's a bit like you know, some games or rankings, they followed very much some Anglo-American system first, and then they perform better. That's natural. If I'm the one who writes the questions, my culture, maybe my education is favored in that respect. So and then we had to redefine it that, you know, intelligence is far more than just rational thinking, and there are emotions, and this is exactly why I said I think this debate is useful, because we think now, what about collective intelligence, emotional intelligence, what about social intelligence, and intelligence I think has no limits in that sense, and that's where the hope lies in a way. But I think we at the moment, emotion recognition is already very much the practice of the technologies, but in education, I think we are very far behind. And there, I found a quote from a book from 1956, which said we have mastered technology, material things, and we create a lot of wealth and surplus out of that, but we still live in a stone age when it comes to our understanding of human nature and human relations, which is why we kind of lose all the surplus and wealth in arms and war. And sadly, I think this author is still very, very right. And that is where I think we need to, but there's definitely a chance that we succeed. I still remain optimistic in that sense. At least it's worth trying rather than, you know, giving in. Yeah. Thank you very much. It's time for. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Thank you.